On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected.
Thank you to all our amazing channel members for your generous support.
Bill Bixby endures as one of television's most quietly powerful figures, and his passing in 1993 from complications related to prostate cancer reflected not only the vulnerabilities of the era, but also the emotional resilience he had long embodied on screen. His illness unfolded at a time when public conversations about men's health were still limited, and diagnoses like his were often met with silence rather than open dialogue. Even as he battled his condition, he continued to work, directing episodes of a popular sitcom and appearing at ease on set, determined to maintain the professionalism that had defined his career. His death, though rooted in natural causes, resonated with fans who had followed him through decades of roles marked by empathy, quiet heroism, and emotional depth. The immediate aftermath of his passing revealed just how deeply he had woven himself into the fabric of American entertainment. Colleagues recalled his calm leadership and unwavering kindness, while audiences mourned not only the loss of an actor, but of a symbolic figure whose characters often faced private struggle with dignity. His portrayal of Dr. David Banner in The Incredible Hulk gained renewed attention, with many noting that the show's themes of internal conflict and suppressed pain echoed, in a way, the emotional weight Bixby carried in his own life, marked by earlier personal tragedies, including the loss of his son and former wife. His death did not merely end a career, it amplified his legacy by sharpening public memory of his strength, versatility, and grace under pressure. His passing also contributed to growing awareness of prostate cancer in the early 1990s, as celebrities' health battles increasingly shaped public conversations about disease and prevention. While his death did not shift the trajectory of history on a grand geopolitical scale, it subtly influenced cultural attitudes toward male vulnerability, grief, and resilience. In reflecting on Bixby's legacy, one sees how humanity often immortalizes figures not through grand monuments, but through the emotional truths they leave behind. His work continues to circulate across television reruns, documentaries, and fan tributes, each retelling shaping his memory anew. Through storytelling, art, and shared nostalgia, we transform lives like Bixby's into enduring reminders of our complex relationship with mortality, where loss becomes narrative, and narrative becomes a form of immortality. David Cassidy remains one of the most recognizable faces of 1970s pop culture, and his passing in 2017 from organ failure linked to long-term health complications reflected both the pressures of his era and the toll of a life lived under relentless public attention. Rising to fame through the Partridge family, he became an international teen idol almost overnight, a symbol of the glittering optimism and the hidden strain of the entertainment world during the early television age. His health struggles in later years, including issues related to alcoholism, showed the lingering weight of fame acquired too young, and too intensely, at a time when the industry offered little emotional support to its brightest stars. The news of his death carried an immediate cultural shockwave. Fans who had grown up with his voice flooding radio stations and living room televisions suddenly found themselves mourning not just an entertainer, but an era of innocence and communal pop sensation. Radio stations revisited his hits, documentaries resurfaced, and former co-stars shared memories that highlighted his gentle charisma, perfectionist work ethic, and private vulnerabilities. His passing also reignited public discussions about the physical and emotional consequences of early fame, conversations that have since reshaped how society views the pressures faced by young performers. Cassidy's death while not altering world events, deepened his legend by inspiring a renewed appreciation for his artistry. Nostalgia surged as audiences revisited performances that had once defined youth culture, and younger generations discovered the charm that had captivated millions. His struggles, openly acknowledged in his later years, added a layer of poignancy to his story, transforming him into a symbol not only of stardom, but of resilience, regret, and the universal longing for redemption. In a broader sense, Cassidy's passing underscores humanity's enduring relationship with memory and mortality. We immortalize figures like him through music that continues to play across decades, through biographical retellings that frame their lives within the shifting tides of history, and through fan communities that keep their cultural footprints alive. His life reminds us that fame is both a gift and a burden, and that the way we remember such individuals, through art, storytelling, and shared nostalgia, forms a bridge between personal loss and collective cultural heritage. In this way, David Cassidy lives on, not only in the songs that shaped a generation, but in the reflections his life and death inspire about the fragility and brilliance of human experience. André Lachapelle passes in 2019 through a medically assisted death, a decision that reflects both her personal convictions and the evolving social climate of her country. A towering presence in Quebec's cultural landscape, she had spent decades shaping French-Canadian theater and cinema, and her final choice mirrors the era's growing emphasis on autonomy, dignity, and the right to shape one's own final moments. Battling cancer, she approached her last days with the same clarity and integrity that had defined her career, using her platform to openly support the legalization and ethical framing of medical assistance in dying. In doing so, she became not only a celebrated actress, but a symbol of a contemporary debate about compassion, bodily agency, and the humane treatment of terminal illness. Her passing produced immediate ripples throughout Canada's artistic community. Tributes from actors, directors, and political leaders highlighted her elegance, discipline, and quiet strength, while theaters dimmed their lights in remembrance. For many Quebecers, her death carried a dual significance: the loss of a cultural icon and the affirmation of a societal shift toward more open conversations about end-of-life choices. Her decision, publicly acknowledged, helped destigmatize a topic long considered uncomfortable, reinforcing how influential figures can gently move public sentiment simply by living and dying according to their beliefs. Lachapelle's legacy grew in the wake of her death as audiences revisited her films and stage performances, recognizing the subtle power and emotional intelligence she brought to each role. Her passing did not alter the trajectory of world events, but it deepened her symbolic resonance in Quebec's cultural memory. She became a touchstone for discussions about artistic purity, moral courage, and the way a society honors its storytellers. Her death ultimately reveals how humanity continues to grapple with the boundaries of mortality and the desire for agency at life's end. Through retrospectives, film festivals, archival restorations, and educational programs, she is immortalized not only as an actress, but as a figure who embodied grace in both life and departure. In commemorating her, we reaffirm the profound human need to preserve the voices that shaped us, ensuring they remain alive in the collective memory through art, narrative, and the quiet reverence of remembrance. Anne McCaffrey passes in 2011 from a stroke, a quiet and natural end to a life spent imagining worlds far beyond the limits of Earth. Her death reflects an era in which science fiction and fantasy had fully transitioned from niche genres to global cultural forces, thanks in part to pioneers like her. As the first woman to win both the Hugo and Nebula Awards, and the creator of the beloved Dragonriders of Pern series, McCaffrey helped reshape the landscape of speculative fiction, proving that richly emotional, character-driven narratives could thrive alongside grand futuristic concepts. Her passing signaled the end of a foundational voice in genre literature, just as a new generation of writers, many inspired by her work, began expanding the field in diverse and boundary-pushing directions. The immediate consequences of her death were felt most acutely within the literary community. Authors, publishers, and fans across the world shared tributes, emphasizing her influence on storytelling that blended science, fantasy, and human resilience. Sales of her work surged as readers revisited Pern and rediscovered the dragons, telepaths, and brave protagonists who had shaped their imaginations. Although her absence did not dramatically shift the course of science fiction history, it amplified her legend. She came to be seen not just as a successful writer, but as a trailblazer whose success opened doors for countless women in a traditionally male-dominated field. Her death also prompted a broader reflection on the value of speculative fiction as a mirror for human concerns: climate, community, responsibility, and the longing for connection. Themes central to her writing gained renewed appreciation, particularly her focus on cooperation and empathy in the face of existential threats. McCaffrey's legacy persists through film and TV development efforts, fan conventions, academic studies, and reprints of her work, all of which keep her imaginative universe alive for new audiences. Ultimately, her passing highlights humanity's desire to immortalize visionaries through the stories they leave behind. While lives end, the worlds they create can outlive them indefinitely. Anne McCaffrey remains a testament to the power of imagination, a reminder that through art and literature, we preserve not only narratives, but the spirit of the creators themselves, proof that creativity can offer its own form of timeless flight. Max Baer dies in 1959 after suffering a massive heart attack, a sudden and natural death that contrasted sharply with the ferocity and spectacle of his boxing career. Known equally for his showmanship and his devastating punching power, he had once been the heavyweight champion of the world, a title he earned in an era when boxing was among the most closely watched reflections of national pride, economic struggle, and masculine identity. His passing at just 50 reinforced how even the strongest figures of the sporting world were vulnerable to the same frailties that touched ordinary lives. It also echoed the health risks faced by fighters of his generation, many of whom endured long-term physical strain in pursuit of glory. The immediate aftermath of his death was marked by a wave of public mourning, especially among boxing fans who saw him as one of the sport's last great entertainers. Baer had a rare blend of charisma and brute strength, and his unexpected death revived conversations about the physical toll of heavyweight boxing, issues already simmering beneath the surface in a period when athlete health and safety were rarely prioritized. Although his death did not dramatically shift the trajectory of the sport, it intensified the mythos surrounding him. Fans remembered him not only as a champion, but as a figure who brought humor, style, and emotional sensitivity to a brutal arena. Beyond the ring, Baer's influence stretched into Hollywood, where he appeared in films and helped shape the archetype of the charismatic fighter who blurs the line between athlete and entertainer. His death prompted retrospectives on his dual legacy as both a sports icon and a cultural personality, strengthening his place in American memory. Tributes highlighted his generosity, his resilience after the in-ring death of Frankie Campbell years earlier, and his enduring humanity, qualities that deepened the public's emotional connection to him. His passing underscores how society immortalizes figures of physical dominance. Through stories, films, biographical retellings, and the continuing fascination with the golden age of boxing. It reveals our complex relationship with mortality, especially when it claims someone who once seemed larger than life. In remembering Max Baer, we preserve not only the triumphs and tragedies of a single athlete, but also the broader cultural yearning to honor strength, vulnerability, and the enduring spirit of those who shaped their era. Lee Patrick dies in 1982 from natural causes, closing the final chapter of a career that had unfolded across Hollywood's golden age. Known for her crisp wit, expressive features, and ability to elevate even the briefest supporting roles, she became part of the era's fabric, most famously as the loyal secretary Effie Perrine in The Maltese Falcon. Her passing reflected a quieter reality faced by many actors of her generation, a gradual fading from the screen as Hollywood shifted toward new genres, new aesthetics, and new stars. In this sense, her death symbolized the closing of a cinematic era whose craftsmen were slowly disappearing, leaving behind films that had shaped the grammar of modern storytelling. The immediate aftermath of her passing did not spark a national outpouring, but among film historians, critics, and classic cinema enthusiasts, it prompted thoughtful re-evaluations of her contributions. Patrick was a quintessential character actress, someone whose impact was felt in the richness she added to the worlds around the leading stars. Her death invited discussions about the ongoing relevance of supporting performers in shaping the emotional contours of a film. The nostalgia surrounding her passing also reflected a broader cultural longing for the craftsmanship and narrative clarity of mid-century Hollywood, a reminder of how deeply old studio-era films remain embedded in American memory. Although her death did not alter historical trajectories, it did subtly amplify her legend. Retrospectives highlighted her versatility, from comedic roles to noir tension, and emphasized how her performances reflected the values of a time when studios relied heavily on skilled ensemble players. In rewatching her work, audiences rediscovered moments of humor, intelligence, and emotional nuance that might otherwise have been overshadowed by the stars she supported. Ultimately, her passing underscores how we remember contributors to cultural history whose fame was understated but enduring. It reveals humanity's inclination to revisit old films, biographies, and archival interviews when a familiar face leaves the world, a way of reconciling mortality with the permanence of recorded performance. Figures like Lee Patrick are immortalized not through grand monuments, but through the glow of preserved cinema, the essays of film scholars, and the affectionate rediscovery by new generations who continue to find warmth and insight in the roles she once brought to life. Devon Lima passes in 2018 after a difficult battle with adrenal cancer, a natural but heartbreaking end that reflected both the medical realities of the modern era and the pressures faced by performers who came of age in the height of late 1970s pop culture. As a member of LFO, he helped define a moment when boy bands dominated radio, TRL shaped teenage identity, and music felt bright, simple, and endlessly replayable. His illness and the long public silence that followed showed how drastically life can shift after the spotlight fades, highlighting the vulnerability of entertainers often remembered only for a specific cultural moment. The immediate consequence of his passing was an outpouring of grief from fans who had grown up with LFO's breezy, sun-soaked sound. His death also left surviving member Brad Fischetti without both of his bandmates, as Rich Cronin had died years earlier, a somber milestone that symbolized the end of a once-beloved trio. Music writers revisited LFO's brief but intense popularity, noting how their songs captured the optimism and carefree tone of pre-digital pop. Devon, known for his warm stage presence and smooth vocals, was often singled out for bringing a softer, more soulful edge to the group after joining in their breakthrough year. In terms of legacy, his death amplified the band's legend by transforming their story into one marked by both nostalgia and tragedy. Fans who had once danced to their music as teenagers now revisited it with a bittersweet sense of adulthood, reflecting on how quickly eras and lives can pass. His endurance through illness and his continued gratitude toward supporters deepened the sense of connection many felt toward him. His passing reveals how intertwined mortality and memory become when an artist's work is tied to a generation's identity. It shows how audiences respond to the deaths of cultural figures not only with sadness but with reflection, using their art as a bridge to earlier versions of themselves. Devon Lima is immortalized through the songs that still circulate on playlists, through interviews capturing his gentle humor, and through tribute performances that keep LFO's sound alive. In remembering him, we revisit the exuberant simplicity of a pop era now gone, yet forever preserved in the music he helped create. Gardner McKay reaches the end of his life in 2001 after a battle with prostate cancer, a natural death that reflects both the medical challenges of aging and the shifting cultural landscape surrounding masculinity and fame. Known first as the strikingly handsome star of the adventure series Adventures in Paradise, he became a symbol of late 1950s and early 1960s television glamour, an era when ruggedness, wanderlust, and stoic charm defined the leading man. His illness, fought largely out of the public eye, mirrored his lifelong discomfort with celebrity. McKay had famously walked away from Hollywood at the height of his career, choosing instead a life of writing, sculpting, and quiet creative exploration. In this way, his death echoed the values he had embraced: privacy, introspection, and resistance to the pressures of commercial fame. The immediate consequence of his passing was a wave of nostalgic remembrance from fans who had grown up with his on-screen persona. Critics revisited his unusual career trajectory, noting how his decision to abandon stardom had only deepened the mystique around him. Unlike many actors whose legacies rest purely on the volume of their work, McKay's legend grew from the paths he refused to take. His death prompted renewed interest in his novels, plays, and short stories, reminding audiences that his artistic identity extended far beyond the tropical shores and seafaring adventures that made him a household name. In a broader sense, McKay's passing underscored a cultural shift. He represented the kind of mid-century male icon who was expected to embody strength and adventure, yet he spent his later years redefining himself through introspective art and writing. His death reinforced the idea that legacy is not confined to one chapter of life, but is shaped continually by personal choices, reinvention, and authenticity. Reflecting on his departure reveals humanity's enduring struggle with the balance between public identity and private truth. It highlights how memory often elevates figures who defy expectation, choosing integrity over applause. Today, Gardner McKay is immortalized through surviving episodes of his series, through the books and plays that showcase his true artistic voice, and through the quiet admiration of those who value lives lived on one's own terms. His story reminds us that the ways people are remembered often say as much about cultural values as they do about the individuals themselves.